Welcome back to Porcelain Peak's Strange and Scary Podcast, featuring Chop Dog Trivia, deep dive main discussions into the odd and unusual. I'm one of your three favorite hosts, Tone, and I'm joined by
John
and
Internet Daddy, Internet Darling. You know him. I missed you. It's
Anthony D. Wood.
Anthony D. Wood.
I wish Anthony D. Wood, you know what I'm saying? Yes, this week we are going to be doing some Chop Talk about some A24 sequel news and a release date for a Flanagan Shenanigan, one of our favorites. Then we're going to play some trivia, and for our main discussion, we are finishing up our last rites, going to Anthony, talking about The Exorcist 3 and Tim Burton's Ed Wood. So if that interests you, then stay tuned, and we're going to get started with some Chop Talk.
Better fucking interest you. These are my picks.
Yeah.
Chop Talk. Chop Talk. Chop Talk.
Why don't you take an axe and chop it open?
Before we get started with that great news from the daddy, John, Anthony, how are you, fellas? It's been a little bit of a minute.
So the episode is going to come out probably sorta on time. I'm going to give myself a little wiggle room. As long as it's out on Monday, we're good. But
I assure you, nobody is up at midnight with bated breath waiting for the drop of the new Porcelain Peak episode.
They might be up with some bated breath doing something else.
Masturbated breath. Huh? Is that what you mean?
Wait, so are you saying there's Marilyn Manson in it? Sucking their own dick?
Maybe. But yeah, so I started feeling under the weather a handful of days ago. And then it turned out that I had COVID, which is really cool.
I think it's a real problem if you're on top of the weather.
Yeah, just living on top of the weather, baby. But yeah, so we had to wait for me to heal up. Luckily, that day ended up being on Sunday, which is the date we typically upload all of our shit and make sure that it's ready to go.
So as John put it, we're South Parking this shit.
Yeah,
we're doing it
turn it around.
Last minute. These are going to be the freshest thoughts we've ever brought you.
Yeah.
Not accurate.
But yeah, other than that, I've had COVID twice. The second time was barely anything. Didn't even get a fever. Shit's been super chill. I played a lot of Tears of the Kingdom. Obviously watched all these movies.
Played a lot of cowbell.
Yeah, more cowbell. And then before I found out that I had COVID, I went to go see Paramore, and that was an S-tier show, maybe the best show I've ever been to in my entire life. Hayley Williams is fucking phenomenal. Their whole little getup, they've got the band is there are three original members still in the band, but the rest of their new group that they have with them, they have this really jazzy, almost Japanese city pop kind of feel to them, and then just let Hayley Williams do crazy shit, and she's just fucking running around the stage, and she is getting over a lung infection, so it was some Jordan flu game type shit. She was just out there fucking killing it.
Yeah, I'm sure they would appreciate you calling their whole spectacle and all the work they put into it. Their what'd you call it? Their little get together, their little bit, their little
their ensemble.
Their ensemble. Yeah, I listened to the new record on your recommendation. I thought it was very cool. I like that they keep evolving their sound as they continue going on. A lot of bands don't do that, and it gets very stale. And also, I just have always thought that Hayley Williams was a phenomenally talented vocalist, so I am happy to hear her trying some different stuff. I might have to tag along with you guys next time a Paramore show happens.
Oh, next time they're here, I'm going. 100%.
Yeah, and in my neck of the woods, since the last time we saw each other, I have not been sick, just sick with it, you know.
Woo! Hell yeah, brother.
And but we went and saw
Sum 41,
Simple Plan, which I was very excited that they did the What's New Scooby-Doo theme song.
I saw Sum 41.
Yeah, you saw Sum 41. I heard Sum 41 from the parking lot.
And The Offspring.
And while I didn't have a huge emotional investment in any of those bands, I thought Simple Plan was pretty good, and I thought The Offspring put on a really great show.
They did this thing before they came on, between Simple Plan set and their set, where they had a graphic on the screen, and it had a countdown, hey, they're going to come on at this amount of time, which I thought was really cool. And then it was also like an interactive thing where it would show different clips of stuff, but then also camera work onto the people. Like, here's the kiss cam.
Yeah.
Or like, here's the dance cam. And I was like, oh, that's cool to kind of give you something to do between sets. And I really like that countdown because, like, okay, I know I have this much time to get a snack or whatever.
Yeah, there are a lot of bands now that are going to social media and posting like what time they actually go on.
Oh, that's cool.
For some individuals who are just coming to see that band, which I don't approve of. I'm not a big fan of that methodology. I think that if you're going to a show, you should show up and hang out for as many of the artists as you can. But for some people who aren't about that life, you know, if they're just showing up for that one band, they know like, oh, I'm playing at 8, so that's when I'm going to be there, which I think is pretty cool, and it helps with some of those things. I also, the week prior, I went and saw Yellow Card and a list of other bands that were with them, and they had in between, they had this thing called Emo Night Brooklyn, where it's basically like a DJ who plays nothing but emo songs, who like played sets in between each set.
Oh, that's cool. When I don't know, I don't think you were there yet. I think it was between Sum 41 and Simple Plan. The music they were playing was like pop punk stuff, and so the people around us just were like belting out songs like they were singing to the bands, and I was like, this is kind of fun.
Yeah, so that, I think more groups are going to start doing stuff like that.
Have
like,
different music between, because usually we go to shows and like in between sets it's like the opposite of what we're
yeah, 100%.
I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
But we've been good, you know. John Bailey was sick. Fuck him. We're hanging in there. We're having fun. We're doing stuff. Summer's almost over. Show's almost over.
Thank God. I'm getting that. I'm getting that little rumble, that little tickle of Halloween spirit that's starting to build and grow inside me.
I've been thinking about that, and then it's like gonna be our first Halloween without the show in 5 years.
Yeah,
which is fucking weird.
That makes me like actually legitimately kind of scared because I don't know. I don't know. Like,
we're gonna record 5 episodes of the show that no one will see just to make sure that we keep
like
the
in my
shit
head.
going.
I'm like, should we do like we have to do something?
Go to a monthly format.
Well, the thing is, like, I don't know how to do Halloween season without Terror Tales anymore. So even if we're not recording it, like, I feel like we need to do some variation of Terror Tales because we've been doing it since before we were even doing the show. So like, really, it's just a part of what makes as an adult the Halloween season special is like the Terror Tales, and like we make our own event around it. That way, if other shit isn't happening that we're able to make it to, or like things fall through on Halloween night, we know at least like, hey, we had our Terror Tales. We really packed the month full of shit.
Speaking of that, we got another Friday the 13th in October this year, so I think we gotta retry.
Yeah,
hit that cemetery, huh?
With a legit Ouija board by Hasbro, like a real Hasbro branded authentic ancient Ouija board.
I saw a TikTok, I think it was yesterday, and it was like these two people on a Ouija board, and they're like, are you moving it? No. Are you moving it? No. And then they're like, what does it say? And it's like, you. And then it's like, oh, this is the soldier board.
That's awesome. I thought you were going to say that we need to go to the cemetery and drink Grimace shakes.
Oh God! Let's not say we didn't.
What's a Grimace shake?
It's just like a purple shake that they had at McDonald's. It was like one of their limited special things. But the TikTok trend was people going like, "Oh, this Grimace shake! I'm going to try it." And they drink it, and then it would cut to them like
dead,
foaming purple shit out of their mouth, like dead on the sidewalk somewhere, or like hung from the. Well, like some people did really elaborate like horror movie things where like the girlfriend would drink it and then she'd be crawling on the ceiling with like purple shit dripping. So people get really elaborate with their TikToks, but yeah, it was this whole thing about the Grimace shake. But anyway, yeah, we're South Parking this shit, doing it all last minute. So I wanted to scrape for all of the news that we might have missed in the last like week and a half.
Yeah,
and there were some big things, some small things.
As predicted, Talk to Me is getting a sequel called Talk to Me. Did we call that shit, or did we call that shit?
Yeah, and I mean, we obviously meant it as a joke, like, hey, for the love of God, please come up with a better title than that. But
well, they added the sequel.
Talk to Me, the sequel. The speakquel.
That's a missed opportunity, A24, to wrap that shit up.
Yeah, so we don't have any speakquel. So stupid. They don't have any official information about when we'll be seeing that or anything, but the directors, they talked about how they filmed a a short prequel that leads into the movie, and then already had an idea and concept and everything developed for the sequel. So A24, they are pretty... I don't know if it's just because the creators that they use tend to not want to make sequels to their work because they're more like auteur productions, but they very rarely do sequels to anything. They did The Souvenir Part 2, and then I guess if you consider Ty West's whole trilogy of X, Pearl, and Maxine as like a sequel thing, they've obviously greenlit a bunch of his shit. So it's actually a pretty big deal that they were like, hey, this is doing gangbusters, it's good, people like it, it's scary, do a sequel. And especially these guys coming off of YouTube, like they're super young. Watching them on their Corridor Crew episode that they did, I was just like, we gotta make a fucking movie because these guys did a killer job for a first movie, and they're like our age, if not younger.
We'll talk about inspiration and stuff later because I think that there's a movie that we watched in our group of movies for today that is surprisingly inspiring about making films.
Yeah. It's not about the about the small
really
details.
did it for you, huh?
Yeah.
It's about the big pictures. Yeah, you're gonna make a movie about a carp swimming around in a bathtub. If I see it, I'll kill it. So yeah, you mentioned in your brief little teaser that Mike Flanagan's newest shenanigan finally has a release date. I think we all kind of figured that we would get some sort of release in October for this, but The Fall of the House of Usher, which I was really surprised that they set the trailer for this to Confessions. These are my confessions. No, there's no trailer for it yet, but there is an official poster and some images. I am surprised to see that the show takes place like in modern day, like all of the sets and everything. It's like a modern, like almost like Frank Lloyd Wright looking like House of Usher thing. I don't know. Looks very interesting. October 12th of this year, so it's going to be a dope Halloween season. Whenever we get a Flanagan something around Halloween time, I know it's going to be extra special and spooky. And yeah, we've just been waiting for fucking ever for this, so I'm happy that it's coming up in the next couple months.
And we're big Po boys.
Yeah,
we like a Po boy, and we like Ed Growlin.
Yeah, and we're Po boys, and nobody loves us.
There you go. You got 3 Po boys in 3 different ways.
And it'll be Flanagan's last shenanigan with Netflix.
Can't say I'm terribly sad about it.
Nope, not at all. I wanted to mention both because we have been fans of Rebecca McKendry as a person in the past. I watched her Glory Hole Demon movie with J.K. Simmons that she made, and I thought it was all right. It was kind of fun. The next movie that she is coming out with also ties into something that we've talked about on a past episode. She has made a Shudder film about the elevator game.
Oh, shit.
So something that we talked about way back when, I think like a season or 2 ago, when we were talking about
name?
urban legends.
Something Lamb?
Elisa
Lamb.
Lamb?
Yeah, and this whole doing a certain combination in the elevator to like travel to a different dimension. But that is going to be dropping on Shudder September 15th.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah, check it out if you are into creepy urban legend stuff, or if you like Rebecca McKendry from Shockwaves.
Shockwaves and Killer POV, I think, before that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if she was on both of them, but she was for sure on Shockwaves.
This is something that I wanted to mention just because if you haven't seen the black and white version of this movie, there's now going to be an official release of it, and you should definitely seek it out if you haven't checked it out. The Mist is getting a 4K Ultra HD release with the black and white version included. So
I usually just turn the color off on my TV.
Exactly, yeah. So
I want to pick this up and I want to see if it's different. I've done the color swap on the TV thing. I've never been able to get a copy of it like actually done correctly by visual effects.
Yeah, I would assume if it's going to be on the 4K Ultra HD release that this had some sort of actual thought put into the black and white version, as opposed to them just taking all the sliders and desaturating it. But yeah, The Mist is great. If you haven't seen it, wait until this comes out.
You'll be sad if you missed it.
Black and white version because
it's
much better.
I recommend the black and white version.
Yeah, 100%. It makes the effects that seem dated not feel dated at all. And like I said, you'll be sad if you missed it.
And it feels like a old school monster movie, which kind of ties into what we're talking about later.
Yeah, and then I recently went through my intention was to rewatch all of the Dead movies. I stopped after the third one because I hadn't seen them all years and years. I've seen Night a million times. I've seen Dawn.
And you've seen Night a million times on other movies too.
Yeah. But I rewatched Night with Romero's commentary because I had never done that, which was awesome because, like you were just saying, it's an amazing example of like just a bunch of friends who got together to make a movie. And the cool thing about listening to his commentary on the next two movies was just how much that mentality really carried over throughout his entire career of him just going like, I just want to make movies with my friends and I don't really care as much about how well they're edited or make sense. You know, it's just more just like we wanted to have fun and we put all the fun shit on screen. So I watched Night, Dawn, and Day of the Dead. Great movies. Check them out. But I had forgotten Romero was actually working on a conclusion to his Dead franchise. Had a screenplay. It was called Twilight of the Dead. It was in the very early stages of going into production when he passed away.
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
And it is now being revived. It is now being pulled from the grave.
Being exhumed.
Yeah. So, before he passed away in 2017, George A. Romero was developing his final zombie movie called Twilight of the Dead. And Deadline now reports that the film has backing from Roundtable Entertainment and a planned late 2023 start date in Puerto Rico. We love to say it, Puerto Rico. The George A. Romero estate is teaming up with LA financier Roundtable, and the movie... Yeah, it was penned by Romero, but Joe Netter, Robert Lucas, and Paolo Zalotti are doing like a refresh of the screenplay. But from what I've heard, it is being made in tandem with the Romero estate, and their statement has been that it is going to be a Romero movie, just because they're going to try to direct it and make it and do it in the way that he would have done it, like what his vision was.
Yeah.
And try to give his because it would be sad if he didn't his intended conclusion to all of these movies,
I mean,
as
they
little
don't
as they
really-
actually connect.
yeah.
But it was something he wanted to make, he was about to make, and then unfortunately passed away.
Have you seen the other three?
I've seen them all at least once, and I didn't love them. Like Past Day,
Land
I don't
is
think
good.
I've heard that Land is pretty good. Day, I didn't love. I think Savini's effects get the best. I think they are in the entire franchise. In Day, the gore is amazing, but I'm just not a big fan of stories about military people and military compounds. It's why I don't like Aliens as much as I love Alien. Like,
Well, a lot of the characters just aren't fun in Day.
yeah, no, exactly. I love that he continued the trend of in Night, he has an African American protagonist. In Dawn, he has an African American protagonist and a woman, and then in the third one, it's a woman as the protagonist as well. And he just liked casting, outside of the box that everybody was in at that time, and he was just a really cool guy. Like, I would highly recommend checking out those commentaries. Most of them are available, I think, on YouTube. It's usually him, and Savini sits in on the one for Dawn of the Dead, so it's really cool to hear him just talk about how fucking fun making that movie was, and how he just loved that it was Halloween for 2 months, and he would just pass out under an escalator, and then somebody would wake him up and say, like, we need you to jump through a window with a motorcycle or make somebody's head explode. And he'd be like, yeah, sure, I'll be right there. So yeah, look forward to that. No like release or anything, but it should start filming here at the end of the year. With the success of Renfield with Universal Classic Monsters, there are now reports that Maggie Gyllenhaal is going to be directing a Bride of Frankenstein remake called The Bride. This
In
was
that
first.
same vein?
I'm not sure. That's just what this article led with. But it says, as first reported by World of Real, this news comes from Production Weekly and cites Penelope Cruz as the bride, Christian Bale as Dr. Frankenstein, and Peter Sarsgaard also in the cast. None of this is officially confirmed, but this is the newest iteration of somebody wants to make a Frankenstein movie. Let's see if it actually happens. Cool. I liked Maggie Gyllenhaal's first movie. I'm sure it came out last year. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
Lost Daughter?
Lost Daughter, yeah. Thought it was fantastic. I don't know how that's going to translate to doing a Bride of Frankenstein movie, but I like Maggie Gyllenhaal, and I am interested to see what she does with that.
Hopefully she doesn't suck too many fucks.
How does one suck
a fuck? And then for the last bit of big happy news before we talk about our typical sad news at the end of Chop Talk, So Radio Silence is no longer, that team is no longer going to be helming the Scream franchise. It has now been officially announced that Christopher Landon, the director of Happy Death Day to You, Freaky, and that We Have a Ghost movie that just came out with David Harbour on Netflix that apparently was god-awful. I haven't seen it yet. But he is going to be helming the franchise. The reason that I am excited about this personally is that he obviously very much leans a lot more into the comedy horror stuff, and so I could see if they really wanted to lean in that direction, they could. I know a lot of people are like, I just want to see Scream get more and more fucked up, but I'm like, we're going into our 7th fucking movie in this franchise. If it's got to get kooky, at least that'll be interesting and it'll be different.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are like, oh, I just don't want it to get as like wild and kooky as the Happy Death Day movies or whatever. And I'm like, so you just want these movies to be exactly the same forever, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like the first 3 that he did movies. It's just so weird to like have different people a part of this franchise because Wes was like the one person for so long.
And that was part of this. What made it special was that it was like Wes, like unless he came back, they weren't making another one. And
right.
It was like that until he passed.
But I get it. Other people got other projects. I'm not mad about this guy. It's just a weird thing that they're just like passing the baton. It's like we could just end it. Like, let's just let the franchise end.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people, our friends over at Fear the Talking Queers, also very excited that Chris Landon is a gay man. And so we will be having a gay man helming the franchise, at least for this movie and potentially going forward. And
I didn't know Neil was involved.
What? Oh, gay man.
Yeah.
I got you.
Come on, huh? Come on, huh? All right, anyway.
But yeah, I'm open to it as much as I am could potentially be open to another Scream sequel. I'm like, I really don't
It's
care.
not like they fucking, broke the mold with the last 2.
Yeah,
They were fine.
Yeah, I don't have any huge. I've seen 6, I think 2 or 3 times now, and I don't have a huge urge to go back to it anytime soon. But yeah, that brings us around to our final sad news, and part of the reason why I am wearing my Exorcist shoes, which you can't even probably tell on this camera, but Oscar-winning Exorcist filmmaker William Friedkin passed away week before?
Yeah,
last week. And yeah, it was very strange because the timing of this, as tends to happen with our show, lined up perfectly with the week where we were going to be talking about The Exorcist 3. And because we were talking about The Exorcist 3, I went back and rewatched the original Exorcist as a double feature with this. And like the day after, or like a couple days after I had watched these movies, we found out that he had passed away. And in my head while watching The Exorcist, I was like, damn, it's such a shame that William Peter Blatty isn't around anymore, because I really dig like his whole mentality around, what he writes. And I was like, but at least we have Friedkin still around. And then I fucking felt like I jinxed it and was like spiraling about this whole like, I didn't wear my Exorcist shoes today and he died and all this stuff. And I was like, no. I think we just have to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the great masterful directors that we talk about and creators that we talk about are older people.
Yeah.
Like we are very lucky that
No, don't.
Yeah.
some of the unnamed people that we still really love from these big franchises are around. But what I did is outside of watching The Exorcist, I had seen The French Connection, which is an absolutely fantastic movie. Probably his other most famous movie outside of The Exorcist. But I went and watched a movie that he made called Sorcerer, and holy shit, is this a movie that should be up there pretty close to like Apocalypse Now in terms of masterpieces of that decade that got completely overlooked. And the reason it got completely overlooked is because it came out a week after Star Wars.
That'll do it.
So, but Friedkin, the reason I decided to check it out was he said it was his most personal, challenging, and best movie that he felt he had ever made. And while I, on an emotional level and a personal level, like The Exorcist more and will always go back to rewatch that, I thought this movie was a fucking masterpiece. It's Roy Scheider from Jaws and a ragtag group of a bunch of other guys, and the premise is that they are all from different parts of the world and they've all have either like hits out on them or horrible things that have happened in their life that make them have to flee the country. They all end up in this country together where they are told, hey, you'll get a bunch of money and citizenship here if you can transport this leaking dynamite that needs to go 200 miles from here to here, because there's a mine that's on fire or like an oil well that's on fire. And I guess the way you put out a on fire oil well is you blow it up with dynamite. So the dynamite is like leaking in the back of these trucks that they have to build from scrap parts, and they have to take them through the jungle for 200 miles. And so it's all these guys, like, it's so fucking tense. There's a part on a bridge during a storm where they're trying to get across this rope bridge with these trucks, and the dynamite is like, it's got nitroglycerin leaking out of it, so if it bumps into something, it'll fucking explode.
Oh.
And so they have to there's all the inner workings of the men and how they disagree with each other, and they all have to try to, so it was great. I would highly recommend it. Friedkin has an amazing like documentary style that is why the things like The Exorcist are so frightening, or like this movie was so tense and felt like you were there. I didn't know why the fuck it was called Sorcerer until the very end. There's no magic or fantasy elements.
I'm out.
So
It sounds like you had yourself a real freaking weekend.
I was making that joke to myself the entire week after he passed away. I was like, I gotta make sure to have a Friedkin weekend, baby.
But to have you some fun.
Yeah, but let's pay a little bit of respect to the dead. R.I.P. William Friedkin. We'll miss you.
Yeah, check out his other films outside of The Exorcist, or just watch The Exorcist if it's been a while.
Yeah, 167 times, like Arme and BJ.
And it keeps getting funnier.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for Chop Talk. We hope that you enjoyed that, and stay tuned because we're going to get started with some trivia.
That Christmas house of wax, the fog, piranha. It's one of those, right? Right?
For trivia this week, we're continuing with Movies Trivia Game. How that works is we'll read a category and then go in a circle, reading a question to each other, with me to John, John to Anthony, Anthony back to me. You said it's a sweep. Maybe we'll go me to Anthony.
Well, and
Easy questions? Yeah, I'll take those.
since I made the joke about swamp shins, I did want to take this moment to ask the audience a very important question, which is, do you guys wash your legs in the shower?
I had an argument with my coworker about this.
Yeah, I know, and that's why since you told me about that argument, every time I'm in the shower now, I like to have an extra special moment of like cleaning my legs.
Don't do. Think about this: is you probably don't wash your hands
in the shower.
Yeah, like they get soap on them, but do you sit there and scrub them like you do in the sink?
Well, I put the soap and I like get some in, and then I like lather it together so I can spread it
but
around.
you don't really wash your hands.
And that's
So here's the deal. I use accoutrement.
Okay.
So I don't wash
You have a
my
loofah?
body with my hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you don't wash your hands at all.
No, I wash my hands before I get in the shower.
Yeah. The argument was that his legs get sweaty, so he washes his legs. And I'm like, I ain't washing them. And I'm like, what is your shin sweating? But then the other day, I think when we were at that show, my legs got pretty sweaty.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh fuck, yeah, I was wrong.
I wash the whole thing every time.
Anyway,
I do pits, tits, and splits.
That's been our show powwow.
Anyway, first category, comedy animation. John, whose leg does Arthur cut off in Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
It's weird. We're just talking about legs today. Huh?
Oh, fuck.
Hopefully that dude showered that leg before he got cut off.
Is it The Black Knight?
That is correct.
Anthony, what actor was left alone in Home Alone?
What actor?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to use his official current legal name, which is Macaulay Culkin.
That is correct.
He did that?
Yeah, so he put out a poll because I guess his middle name was some family name or something, and he was like, my middle name's boring. I need a more exciting middle name. So he put it up to a poll, and the number one result was that he should just make his middle name also Macaulay Culkin, and the second result is that he should be Macaulay the McRib is back Culkin. And so yeah, so if you look him up, that is his official name.
That's ridiculous. Famous people, huh?
Yep.
Crazy. Tone, in Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. Yeah, right. Who plays the avatar of Bethany, a popular and vain high school student?
Jack Black.
It is indeed Jack Black.
Yeah.
The best part of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. So we're all on the board, and we're moving into action adventure. John, what is Dave's superpower in Kick-Ass?
He doesn't feel pain.
That is true. This is saying he has none. So maybe they're not counting that as a superpower.
I would say you're right because he gets nerve damage, so
Yeah.
he can't feel pain. So that's what makes him like even a half.
That's the reason why he tries.
Yeah,
Right.
so I would
Yeah.
say that counts.
I'm gonna give it to you.
Okay.
You're smarter than that card, John.
Yeah,
Fucking jerks. Stupid cards.
I guess it's not a superpower.
I mean,
It's
I think
neurological damage.
but I still think that it still counts.
No,
it's
I-
the same thing that we would. The impetus of Spider-Man getting powers is some shit's happening to him.
He got bit by a bug.
Yeah, fucking bug, brother. Anthony, complete this telltale line from the movie 300. This is
Are you fucking kidding me? That's the line they decided to go with.
yeah.
Sparta.
Yeah, this is Sparta is the line. Used over and over again by
Oh my god, that was
post-hardcore bands in their breakdowns for years and years
probably
to
in
come.
a Skrillex song for the drop.
Yeah.
I mean, just the overuse of just that scene, like for the next 5 years after that movie came out, was insane. Just
Madness.
everybody was doing it. Cool scene though for a pretty cool movie.
Frank Miller.
Oh, so we were talking about superpowers, and I meant to mention this during our X-Men episode. If you haven't checked that out, check out our X-Men Days of Future Past bonus episode on Patreon. But Stan Lee said the reason that he came up with the idea of mutants was just that he wanted to have a bunch of characters that had superpowers, and he didn't want to have to explain how they got them. He was like, I can't just have like a bunch of radioactive bugs giving powers or like space rays or whatever. He was like, so I'll just say they were born that way. And I was like, smart man, Stan Lee. Tone.
Things.
What was John Wayne's last movie? And you do have options, luckily.
Fucking thank God.
The Shootist, Rooster Cogburn, or Brannigan.
What? The shootist.
The Shootist,
Was it Rooster?
Rooster Cogburn, or
You said the same thing twice.
or
Cockburn.
or Brannigan. Cogburn. You sicko.
Oh God.
I'm pretty sure that is Olivia Wilde's real last name, though, is Cockburn. So that's why she took the Oscar Wilde
Yeah.
thing for her last
Rooster
name.
Cogburn. That's a good ass like fake name.
The Shootist. I think it's a real movie.
But it's a good ass fake name. My name is Rooster Cogburn.
I don't know. Brannigan.
Michael Scarn. That's your Brannigan? Was
Yeah.
Ooh, the answer is The Shootist. Which I learned yesterday, and that's why I was saying this is really weird, that much like most of the Wild West stuff we see in movies, a lot of that didn't actually exist in the Wild West. Like shootouts in the street and cowboy hats like weren't a thing. Everybody wore like, rounded bowler hats. And the term gunslinger didn't come out until like the 1900s when they were making Western movies, and they were called shootists back in the day. So yeah, that's where that comes from.
Wow.
I'm gonna just shoot
Gunslinger
something
is
out of my Rooster
much cooler.
Cogburn. You know what I'm saying?
I don't want to know any of it. John Anthony got 2. I got the 1. We're going into.
Will you marry me and become Mrs. Rooster Cogburn?
We're going into drama musical. John, what movie depicts a teenage boy working for Rolling Stone magazine while on tour with the band Stillwater?
I saw this recently.
For
It's
the
a
first
good.
time?
It's a good one.
Very
Is
good
it
movie.
Almost Famous?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is correct. Good job.
It's another one of those ones where there was like not the exact same idea, because obviously they're very different, but came out at like the exact same time between Almost Famous and Rockstar.
Rockstar.
Yeah.
That was Mark Wahlberg, right?
But that's basically like a
Biopic?
sort. It's not a biopic, but it's like a sort of like retelling of like what happened with Judas Priest.
Maybe.
Judas Priest, baby.
That's got a Billy Crudup, right? Almost Famous?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
He's
Heather
Mr. Water.
Graham?
Yeah.
Mr. Stillwater. Anthony, who won Oscars for his roles in The Godfather Part 2 and Raging Bull?
Okay. That's going to be Robert De Niro.
It is indeed Robert De Niro.
He came out with another one of those fucking...
Kids?
that, yeah. But his whole
Got him.
the whole dirty grandpa shtick that he's got going on or whatever. He came out with another one of those where it's like a let me tell you about my father, something like that. Where it's he's the grumpy father that like.
And does he like kill like a fucking?
I didn't look into. I just saw the trailer on like the Apple new movies.
Yeah.
And was just like, oh my god, he's still doing these, huh? He's like, I'll take a little break for An Irishman, and then I'll go back to the movies that probably make him a lot of Redbox money.
Yep.
Tone, Leaving Las Vegas, which was an excellent movie, earned both Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue Oscar nominations. Who won?
Come on, baby.
I'm going to go with Cage.
It was indeed the Rage Cage.
Rage Cage did win. Yep.
All right, great. So you guys got 3. I got the 2, and we're moving into horror and sci-fi. What?
The way you said I got the 2, it sounds like you're saying you gotta go use a facility. I got the 2 in
Excuse me, teacher. I've got the 2.
Did I ever tell you guys that story? I didn't know that was a common thing that people said, like 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a thing between me and my family.
Ah.
And so one time we're at a restaurant, and I'm walking to the bathroom. I'm little, and my dad's like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I gotta go number 2," thinking that it was like code. You know what I mean? And he was like,
I'm just imagining you like giving him that like knowing nod too. Like,
and I was like, "Hell yeah, I got this.
I got this.
Dude." Doozies. I got a doozy of a toozy.
Everyone in the restaurant's like, that boy's shitting.
Oh Lord, he's shitting.
Yeah, that was before I was afraid of shit in public. John, in the X-Files movie, who gets stung by a virus-carrying bee?
Scarred the shit out of me when I was a kid. I, for some reason, remembered that specific moment in this movie for years.
I'm gonna say.
Oh, sorry, you have options.
Okay.
Mulder or Scully?
I'd say that I was like, I've got a 50-50 here. We were gonna potentially watch the X-Files movie, and I would have been very well prepared for this. I'm gonna say Scully.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
For a card sweep, brother.
Oh, cool. I got one more to go. Anthony, I think this might be the most difficult question you'll get today.
Oh gosh.
What is RoboCop's last name? You have options.
Murphy.
Don't need them. Yeah, the options were Murphy, Smith, or Howard.
I think it's Alex Murphy. Mm-hmm. Murphy. RoboCop is a dope movie. Have we ever done RoboCop? Did we do RoboCop? No, okay. I think I just watched it recently and went, this is a dope movie.
We could do another month of rights.
Yeah.
Last-ditch efforts.
I also have been wanting to rewatch Starship Troopers. Also Verhoeven. Tone, I think you're gonna have a good time with this one. Who directed the first Jurassic Park film? Oh. And you have options. No, I'm kidding. You don't.
So you better not have options.
Steven Spielberg.
It was indeed
Steven Spielberg.
The Berg.
Steven Spielberg.
So you mentioned
Got a long neck.
So you mentioned
I think I saw Steven Spielberg in Marrakesh.
How does he brush his teeth?
I was doing a Jimmy Stewart impression like while I was sick, just to myself. It was one of the things.
Better, dude.
It was one of the things just keeping me sane.
Looks like some kind of extraterrestrial.
I really wish I could stop sneezing right now.
That truly was a close encounter.
But you mentioned Starship Troopers, and there's been this like TikTok video going around of like I'm doing my part, and then what's his face from, is it Tim Robinson or whatever? I didn't do fucking shit.
I gotta love that. Yeah. All right, great. So you guys got 4, and I got the 3.
Mm-hmm.
And
what? Is that a 1 and a 2?
Yeah, you don't even want to know what the 3 is. Comedy animation. John, who voiced the donkey in Shrek?
That'd be Eddie Murphy.
That's correct.
I'm making waffles. Anthony, and the 2017 Best Picture Oscar goes to, but then it didn't.
Oh. Goes to La La Land.
Yeah, that's the answer.
But it didn't. It went to Moonlight.
Yep.
And we were there in the apartment when that happened.
And all of our collective minds were fucking blown.
Yeah. Well, because that was when we were having to watch it like in a shitty stream where like sometimes it would buffer and cut out, and we were like trying to stream it from the
We
BBC
were
website.
pirates.
Yeah, and I remember
because
being
we
like,
didn't have
is
cable.
this actually happening? Like, is this really happening? Somebody, I think I might have asked you guys, somebody posed this question on a video I was watching recently or on a commentary where they're like, what do you think has the biggest long-term impact on the Oscars, or the bigger long-term impact, that snafu or the slap from Will Smith's Oscars?
I think that's snafu. I think people stopped talking about the slap like 3 months later.
After the meme had run out?
Yeah.
But I bet you that if you mention it to people, they're going to know what you're talking about. Be like, hey, remember what happened with the Oscars in 2017? And people will be like, no.
Yeah, if you say La La Land Moonlight,
La La Light.
La La Light, yeah, only people who watch the Oscars are going to have any idea what you're talking about. If you say the slap, they will immediately know you're talking about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. You don't even have to say anything beyond that. Just, oh, you remember the slap?
True.
That show.
But that's why I wanted to bring it up, is because I also am like, yeah, I don't know. Because for me, I think the bigger impact was the La La Land Moonlight thing,
Yeah.
because it made me go like, oh, this entire institution is a lie.
Aside, so obviously this most
Celebrities
recent
being stupid, I'm just used to. So
this most recent Oscars you won. I think
I did.
that
Thanks
I
for
think
remembering.
I think that Oscars was also the last time you'd won before, and you won all like 4 or 5 of the years in the middle, right?
We don't have a running track.
should though. Tone,
But
wait,
one of us is on top.
Yeah.
is it? Oh yeah, so I just answered that and went on a tangent. Tone, in what 2006 remake does Steve Martin play Inspector Jacques Clouseau?
Pink Panther.
The Pink Panther. Yes, you are correct.
Nice.
But
All right.
Keep it in it.
5, 4. 5 for the guys, 4 for me, and we're moving into action adventure. John, what movie is considered the culmination of a story arc told over 22 films?
Is that Avengers Endgame?
That is correct. Good job.
Sweet.
Spoiler alert: it didn't end there.
Nope, sure didn't. Anthony,
And
what
everybody's real mad about it.
what film sees Joker and Pyle suffering under abusive drill instructor Gunnery Sergeant Hartman?
Is that Full Metal Jacket?
Is indeed Full Metal Jacket by by Mr. Kubrick.
Stephen Kubrick.
Yeah, Stephen Kubrick.
This is my rifle. There are many like it.
Yeah.
Tone, true or false? In Con Air, they attempt to land the plane on Rodeo Drive.
Oof, I haven't seen that since it came out. I'll say true.
It's false. It's the Las Vegas Strip.
Damn, verbatim. It says false, parentheses, Las Vegas Strip. I wouldn't know. I haven't seen Con Air since I was a kid.
I've
All
seen
I
Con
know
Air
is
too many
the
times.
blowing hair in the wind.
Put the bunny
And that
back
it's a
in the
blow
basket.
dryer brand.
Yeah.
So I always thought like, was that why they called the
Maybe,
blow dryer that,
maybe.
or was it the other way around? Because he had the luscious hair, they decided to call it Con Air, so you knew what brand he was using.
More like Con Hair. All right. Well, you guys got 6, and I got 4.
Yep.
And we're moving into drama, musical. John, what film earned Richard Attenborough an Oscar for Best Director?
Can you read the question, Una Mas?
Yeah. What film earned Richard Attenborough an Oscar for Best Director?
Old Dickie Attenborough, if that helps you at all.
Yeah, that made things so much easier. I think this is going to be where the bed gets shitted.
We're getting number 2.
How do you guys know that?
How did you crack the code?
Do we have the same father? He just names all his sons Anthony. Just goes around.
Poppy. Yeah, he names you Anthony and then says number 1 is P, number 2 is Pooh, and then just disappears. Good luck, son.
Pretty much, man.
I don't know. American Beauty.
It is Gandhi.
Yeah.
I had a suspicion. I was like, I think he did Gandhi.
Yeah, I don't know much about Richard Attenborough.
Outside of he
He has a brother.
Yeah, outside of he made a Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Did he? Which one?
Like he is Hammond in Jurassic Park, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he made
He like created the Jurassic Park.
Yeah, that's
a movie like he did one of the. Okay,
That's confusing. Yeah. He should have named the park something different if he knew the movie was going to be called Jurassic Park.
no, you should have fucking worded it different. Read the question.
all right. I'm 99.9% sure this will seal it if you get it. Anthony, what 2019 movie was the first R-rated film to gross more than $1 billion worldwide?
What year?
2019.
2019 was the first R-rated movie to gross how much?
1 billion worldwide.
1 billion.
$1 billion. I feel like the year's not right on this, but I'm having a hard time knowing for sure. I want to say a Deadpool. Probably the second one if it was 2019. That's going to be my guess, so I don't hold it up too long.
Okay, you're not far off, but it is the Joker.
Oh,
Fucking yeah! I was trying to remember. I was like, God damn it! I know it's a comic book thing, but I cannot remember an R-rated comic book movie besides Deadpool. So
You were all over it, but it was the Joker.
I forgot about that movie.
Really funny because it basically stole the story from Taxi Driver.
And a little bit of King of Comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all kinds of Scorsese mixed in. Mm-hmm. All right, well, we still got a heated competition going
Yeah,
on then.
still tight.
I'm here.
Oh yeah, and
I'm over here.
and tone. The line, I think you're gonna be okay, dude. The line "Life is a box of chocolates" is from what movie?
Hey, give him some.
It's gonna be Forrest Gump. Is that what you wanted?
He's gumping.
I want that to be like an NBA jam instead of like he's heating up, he's gumping. He's
Oh, that boy's gumping. Do you know why life is like a box? Life is a box of chocolates.
Because you never know if you're gonna get one filled with toothpaste.
So true. That's why I break them all open and make everybody mad who tries to get the other chocolates.
People find it really weird that I only brush my teeth with the chocolates with the toothpaste in them.
All right, great.
Yeah, you got it. You're good.
So I have 4 now.
You have 5.
I got 5 now, and you got 5. And he's got 5. No.
No, we both have 6.
Yeah, you're right. I gotta get
We both got to fail, and then
and I gotta get it. It's not gonna happen. So congratulations to you guys. Next category is horror sci-fi. John, what is the nickname of the serial killer Clarice is chasing in Silence of the Lambs?
Shoot, why
Is it asking for
it's asking for the
name or the moniker?
it's asking for the nickname
It's
is
a
what
nickname.
nickety name.
Nickname. Okay.
Shit.
Come on, Candy King. Same guy, right?
Yep.
I think I might bow out because I don't want to hold it up. All of my previous years. So I know who it is and I can see it.
Just picture the man tucking his ding-a-ling away.
Hey, you don't have the picture. I can show them that too.
Would you fuck me?
Oh shit!
This is the end.
Yeah, I'm gonna bow out.
You taking a
Zero? Taking the L. Yeah.
Ooh, that's Buffalo Bill.
Buffalo William.
I kept wanting to say
Gum.
I kept wanting to say like Billy Bob, and I was like, that's not right. I was like, it's Bill something. I just can't
It's
figure
that
it
movie
out.
where Clarice Starling is chasing Billy Bob Thornton as he wears women's skin.
All right, Anthony. Here's your slam dunk. Where do the town citizens hole up in? Funnily enough, The Mist.
They're in a grocery store.
Says supermarket here, but those are the same thing.
Okay,
Wrong.
well in California we don't call them that shits. Okay, they call it a grocery store.
Hey, if you watch Supermarket Sweep,
I go there to buy soda. I don't go there to buy pop. I don't go there to buy Coke. I go there to buy LaCroix.
Depending on what supermarket you go to right here, you might be going there to buy Coke.
Says, I don't go there to buy Coca-Cola. I go there to buy cocaine.
I go there to buy Coke Zero. Because I myself am a zero. Tone.
Was that full sweep for the boy?
No. Yeah, 7. 7 out of 8.
7. Tone, in another weird turn of events, as if we were just discussing this, how does Peter Parker become Spider-Man?
By accident.
I didn't he number 3'd his pants.
I didn't mean to become a Spider-Man.
He did it. That is the right answer, but I know you want radioactive spider.
He was bit by a bug, yeah. Radioactive spider.
Bit by bug.
You got it.
All right, so we died.
Yeah, we sure did.
Sick. That's so cool.
Oh, and am I...
And you won again.
You're the winner.
Am I streaking?
You're the winner.
I think so.
Yep, you are.
Ooh, put that crown on.
So you got 15 of the last 16 questions right.
Beautiful. Oh, yeah, because I swept the last one. Huh?
Crazy stuff.
Cool. Well, it's been a while since I was, doing my cleaning lady duties, so one missed, not a big deal, okay? I just got to make sure I do better next week.
You got it. I believe in you.
Thanks.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for trivia. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Anthony's Last Rites.
Uh-oh. I was going to do the heartbeat sound, but I always try that. And
Ooh. He's like, it just vomits.
It sounds like I'm drowning.
Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/Porcelain Peak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more. Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/Porcelain Peak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more.
Hey, you want to see something really scary?
Welcome back. Hope you had a nice little break. We are going to wrap up our Last Rites segment, and this week was Anthony's picks, and he went with The Exorcist 3 and Ed Wood.
You know how I like my alliteration?
Yeah.
So I went with 2 E picks, but
Oh,
also...
you know what I should grab real quick. Keep going.
Yeah, but also these are movies that I've been wanting us to watch on the show for quite a long time and never really found a great way to plug them in. I know we've talked about Tim Burton in the past, and so I've probably talked about how much I love Ed Wood, but it is a movie of Burton's that gets generally slept on. Yeah, it kind of got forgotten about when it came out. Also, it being in black and white and about a person that very few people know the name of or recognize. And that's sad because Ed Wood, I think, is, in my opinion, one of Tim Burton's best movies. And then with The Exorcist 3, I know we talked about wanting to do a BDE month of some sort where we talked about different Brad Dourif movies. And we didn't get a chance to do this one, but I really wanted you guys to check it out so I could get your opinion on it, because I think this one is, while not the masterpiece of the original, comes very close and it is quite good. So that's what we did. We watched them. You guys want to start with The Exorcist?
Sure.
That came out first.
Yeah, let's do that.
Written and directed by
Blatty.
Blatty.
Yep, William Peter Blatty.
Loosely based on this, I'm guessing?
Legion, yep. So,
Or based on, I don't know if it's loose.
yeah, a little bit of background. William Peter Blatty is the man who wrote the original Exorcist novel. He worked really closely with William Friedkin, which is why you see who directed The Exorcist and who recently passed away, as we talked about in Chop Talk. They worked very closely together to execute The Exorcist. It was pretty much a co-production between the two of them, and Blatty very much wanted to make sure that his story was done justice. Then that obviously spun off into The Exorcist 2, which Blatty had nothing to do with, Friedkin had nothing to do with, and that movie tanked hard. In the meantime, Blatty...
Although a direct sequel to Reagan's storyline.
Yes. In the meantime, Blatty had written what was his sequel to The Exorcist called Legion, and while it does not have an exorcism in the book story and kind of goes in a very different direction... it was eventually something that the studio was like, yeah, we want to make another Exorcist movie. You can do Legion with some adjustments and changes to tie it more into the Exorcist franchise, which is why there are multiple versions of this movie now. For the longest time, it was just the theatrical cut. That is probably the one that all of us watched. That's the one that's on Shudder that Joe Bob did his coverage of, which is how I watched it this time around. And that is The Exorcist 3 Legion. Then about 20 years later... We finally got the director's cut with the original ending, which drops the exorcism from the movie and is just called Legion. And that is closer to what the book was. But I'll give you a little bit of info on this movie specifically. This came out in 1990, and the synopsis is, "Do you dare walk these steps again?" Little reference to the stairs that some people fell down in the first one. Set 15 years after the original film, The Exorcist 3 centers around the philosophical Lieutenant William F. Kinderman, who was played by a different actor in the first one, but is a major player in the first Exorcist. Is now played by George C. Scott, who is investigating a baffling series of murders around Georgetown that all contain the hallmarks of the Gemini Killer. The Gemini Killer, a deceased serial killer. It eventually leads him to a catatonic patient in a psychiatric hospital who has recently started to speak, claiming he is the Gemini and detailing the murders, but bears a striking resemblance
Why do you want to be here?
to Father Damien Karras from the original Exorcist. So yeah, like I said,
And that is the same actor, yes?
same actor, yes. Jason Miller. So George C. Scott plays Kinderman. Ed Flanders as Father Joseph Dyer, who is also an important character in the first movie, but played by a different actor here. Brad Dourif as the Gemini Killer. Jason Veneman. Jason Miller as Father Karras / Patient X. Nicole Williamson as Father Morning. Scott Wilson as Dr. Temple, old Herschel from The Walking Dead. And a few other people whose names I don't recognize, but those are our major players. Yeah, this is a movie that I think for the longest time did not get any sort of love. I think most people did not like this movie when it came out, and it was obviously going to be compared to the original Exorcist. But it has become more of a cult favorite, cult classic over time, especially with a lot of people hyping up the scene in this that a lot of people consider the greatest executed jump scare of all time. And so this is, really built a big following throughout the years. I did not end up seeing it until I think when we were still living in the apartment in Turlock. I watched it for the first time and thought it was pretty awesome, and I've only just grown to love it more every time I've watched it. But yeah, I want to hear what you guys thought about this movie. Did you end up rewatching the original Exorcist, or have you seen it recently enough to kind of remember your thoughts on it? Or?
I'd seen it recently enough to remember my thoughts, so I just jumped straight into this. And overall, I had a good time with this. I think that up until the very end, and I did research on this for good reason, up until the end, it didn't really feel like an Exorcist movie. There's not an exorcism in it. It's just this spooky drama about this serial killer and figuring out putting all the pieces together. It's almost kind of like a crime thriller a little bit that just has the elements of
Possession.
Yeah, of possession and The Exorcist. And that's by design, obviously, because that's how the book is. The book doesn't contain an exorcism. And I know that the studios really pushed.
Yeah, they were we can't call this The Exorcist if there's no exorcism.
And he's like,
in it.
He's like, bitch, I didn't want to call this The Exorcist.
I want to call it Legion.
That. Yeah. But I also do think that the crazy escalation that we get in those last few moments where there is an exorcism, there's some pretty cool and gruesome shit.
I think the movie is better for having added the exorcism. I know Blatty didn't want it, but
it does feel a little out of left field, though.
Yeah, and especially because the Exorcist character, we only see him in a very brief scene before this, where he's recuperating a bird in a box, a bird box, if you will, and
I won't.
And then he just randomly is the Exorcist who is at the end is I'm doing the exorcism. But then we'll be talking about spoilers going forward. I will say I obviously highly recommend this. I picked it as one of my last rites. I think it's a ton of fun and has some pretty great spooky moments in it and a lot of just atmosphere and dread.
Yeah, I'll say I recommend it too, but know that it's not The Exorcist. And like John said, it's more of a crime thriller than it is horrific, I guess, in the same way that The Exorcist is.
Yeah, but up until that last exorcism scene, yeah.
I recommend it as well. I do say, don't go in expecting to get the greatest jump scare of all time. Because when you do that, especially for people who are fully initiated into the genre, it kind of takes the air out of it a little
Because
bit.
you're going to be waiting for it the entire time you're watching
And
the
then
movie
it's like-
and trying to figure out where it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to talk about it. I don't think that we should spoil it, even that, for anybody.
Yeah, no. I totally agree. I've watched some reviews that say like specifically what scene it is without showing it. I'm like, no, just don't even mention where in the movie it is. Just,
Yeah.
I mean, I do kind of briefly want to talk about how it's set up, but without giving out any details. But what I was saying was the ending exorcism in the original version and what happens in the book is Kinderman just comes to the cell where Dorff / Miller is, and it's just a flat shot. He just walks in, and just takes out a gun and just bang, 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 shoots him, walks out. That's the end of the movie. All the stuff that happens in the house with the old lady, like trying to get the scissors onto the daughter, that all happens the same. And then he goes off to the thing, just bam, 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 shoots him, walks off. So really, I think that this crazy ending we get with like the priest getting sucked up to the ceiling and then skin peeling off. And then
So dope, though.
And then Miller coming out on the crucifix in the middle of the room with all the spirits coming up, and then you get that amazing like cap of just like pure George C. Scott angst, where he gives that amazing speech of like, I believe in hatred and infidelity and all this stuff. It's just way more bombastic, and then I think you get a much more beautiful moment when the priest finally gets the cross and goes like, tries to get through to Karis, and then Karis gets that split moment of breaking the demon's power, and then he's like, now, shoot me, kill me now, and he's able to kill him. I just think that whole execution is a lot better than what Blatty had in mind, which is a testament to the director / writer is not always right with these things. A lot of the time that studio interference is just like a really, really negative thing, and in most cases it is, but I think the studio knew what they were talking about here. In terms of like, we got to give this some sort of, especially with the way this movie is built, to where there's, like you said, there's no really horrific imagery or horrific moments, and
I
so
don't
you
know
really
if we see any of the violence until the end.
And I love that, because then it's really left up to your imagination, what these horrific crime scenes looked like, and being able to convey how horrifying they were through the emotion of George C. Scott when he's describing them.
It's funny.
This
This is
really
almost,
powerful.
It's almost like the opposite school of thought from what we got last week with The Wailing, where in The Wailing they're like, we're not going to show you the details of the killings, but we're going to show you what happened, and you're going to see it. Like, you're going to see every gruesome millimeter of it.
The aftermath.
Yeah, and
of
this
it,
he's describing like about the young boy that's killed in the beginning, where it's like, he had gold ingots shoved into his eyes, and then he was decapitated, and his head was replaced with a Christ statue head in blackface, and then he was crucified onto rowing oars, and like just the complexity and like you wouldn't have been able to show that in any way that really got across the horror of it, especially at the time. And so I think the description. Also, just a lot of this movie, you can very obviously tell that it was written and directed by a novelist. It feels very novelistic. A lot of the movie is just long conversations between Kinderman and Father Dyer, where it's...
although good, they do slow the movie down quite a bit.
Yeah, and so the whole thing kind of has like a slow pace that's really carried through, to me, just by the dread and the bubbling emotion of the characters. The dread, I think, it gets really built up by the way this is shot and edited, where you get a lot of scenes where it'll just be 5 whole seconds of like showing you different iconography sitting around the room, and it'll just do all these little quick cuts, and then you set in for your scene, and you have this like amazing conversation between two people. The carp scene is like an iconic one now from this, where he's talking about the carp swimming around in his bathtub, and just all their conversations about like the nature of evil and all of that. And it's all scored to basically no real score. You get a little hint of Tubular Bells at the beginning, which is about as much of Tubular Bells actually as shows up in the original Exorcist. Everybody says like, that's the Exorcist theme, and it's like that song shows up for all of 10 seconds in the original Exorcist in like 2 scenes maybe. And in this, it's mostly just like guttural noises and distorted chants and religious chants, and it gives this whole thing kind of like, to me, it lends to the Legion idea of like, it feels like there's always multiple malevolent spirits kind of hovering around the frame and like encroaching in on the frame. And just weird, just like noises when things happen throughout the movie. So I think that all kind of like helps with the slow pacing of it, and I just really dig the writing. I think Blatty's a great writer, and the conversations that they have are done really well. You really believe that these people are really good friends, and it makes it to me heartbreaking when Father Dyer is horrifically killed and has all of the blood drained from his body and placed neatly into little cups, and just the real, the slow, like Scott's in disbelief throughout that, where he's like, what are these? It's like, that's his entire blood supply. And then like he doesn't even notice that there's writing on the wall, and then when they pull it down, it's a Wonderful Life, and that's when it clicks with him, like, oh, the 2L was just like the Gemini. And then he has that amazing scene where he's just like telling everybody in the room, like, shut the fuck up, and then he's like explains it to them, like, we gave false information to the public about what the Gemini's hallmarks were, and then he goes through and explains, like, it's this finger on this hand, and it's the mark of the Gemini in the palm here, and you buy the whole thing, and you buy that this man is like becoming unraveled because he thought they got this guy, that this guy had died, and now he's like, but somehow he's back. Somehow Palpatine's returned. Yeah. And and he's killing again, and on top of all of that, his good friend Father Karras seems to somehow have been possessed by this killer and is sitting in this cell and has apparently been walking around for 15 years, having punched his way out of the grave and somehow reconstructed his body. But
yeah, I think that George C. Scott's performance is great.
Yeah.
I think that Brad Dourif's performance is also fucking fantastic.
We got very lucky with how much of that we get in the movie.
I honestly wanted more. I think that is the most interesting part, is like the Gemini stuff, and so I almost feel like I wish I had like the pre-Gemini. And then this post-Gemini. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm pre-Geminiing right now.
Yeah.
Pre-Gemini.
Yeah. And I like that story. I like the idea of like hunting this killer, and then now this killer returning, and them trying to figure that out. And so I would have liked more Dourif, I guess. I mean, he kills it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess so.
Knows how to play a killer.
He was going to be... I don't think that he was really intended to be in the movie at all, except maybe in brief little flashes. But Jason Miller was... and I learned this from Joe Bob's commentary. Jason Miller was so far into the throes of alcoholism at that point that he had what a lot of people call wet brain, to where he just could not remember any of his lines. And so when he came in, like, the bits of him that you see in that movie are pretty much all they were able to get out of him. And so I think they originally intended to have Dourif for like a couple moments of revealing that he's the Gemini killer, but they brought him back in and had him reshoot a bunch of the stuff that was supposed to be Jason Miller material. And I think the movie benefits hugely from that because, yeah, especially like a young, I mean, Dourif's still incredible, but like a young, especially terrifying Dourif, like, and how he can just vacillate from like the most intense, like spitting rage to just sitting back and kind of casually like, I'm something of an artist myself. Did you know that a decapitated head can like still see and still feel for 20 seconds after being removed from the body, so I like to have them watch while I blah blah, and he goes on this long thing about like the horrific things he likes to do to the people that he kills, and he feels genuinely terrifying. And then also just the fear of this idea that this horrific man could somehow have come back and is now, we find out through the course of it that none of the fingerprints in any of these scenes match. So Scott can't figure out how this could be the same killer again with none of the fingerprints matching at any of the crime scenes. And we find out eventually that it's because Pazuzu and these other demon friends have been helping him to like possess the old people around the asylum, around the institute.
And they've been using catatonics because they're easier.
Yeah, because
it's like Shocker.
Yeah, he explains in great depth that taking over Karras's body was a long 15-year process of him trying to reconnect the synapses, and because we saw him get, wrecked at the bottom of those steps at the end of the first Exorcist, and so he had to like put his body together and reform it. I would have liked to have seen that, like him coming out of the grave and like wandering around, but so it's just easier for them to possess catatonic people, and so that's how he's been committing the murders, and that's why you have all these creepy old people throughout the entire movie who are doing weird stuff that doesn't seem to make sense, and you're like, oh, and sometimes they're crawling on the ceiling.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then also, yes, Karras was one of Kinderman's really good friends, and now he is realizing that this man has also had his body tortured by this demon for the last 15 years, which is horrific because the open-endedness of The Exorcist was, did evil win in the end by killing Karras, or is the idea, which was Friedkin's kind of thing, because he liked the more negative connotation, like evil will always exist, you can't beat it. Blatty's intention was, no, through self-sacrifice, Karras is able to save Reagan from the demon, and it was actually it was good. It was an act of good, and that good won at the end. And now it's like this kind of shows no evil won at the end, because now for the next 15 years his body has been possessed by this demon and also by this Gemini killer, and he's been unwittingly a pawn in this entire thing, which makes the scene of him going like "kill me" at the end even more powerful.
Yeah.
I think especially for me, he's my favorite character in the original Exorcist, Karras. So I think that's why watching these back to back, especially since he's the one actor they kept the same between the two. It really, really makes like the horror of that more powerful.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why Blatty made the decision to go it solo this time around, was that he did have that initial like disagreement about like the core of what makes The Exorcist with Friedkin, where the two of them put their heads together and they made magic that neither of them could really control. In that first film, I think that he just wanted to make sure that he could deliver on his vision in this film, and that's the reason why he chose to, because I think originally Friedkin was supposed to try to come back to make this, and they just couldn't see eye to eye.
Yeah, they had a huge falling out, and Blatty had actually sued the studio because they didn't give him his fair share of the profits from the first Exorcist.
And then they sued each other too, right?
Yeah, and then they sued each other, and then later in life they did interviews together where they had seemed to kind of hash things out, but...
Classic Magneto Charles situation.
Yeah, really, it really is.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, old friends turned enemies, but yeah, that totally... Yeah, he wanted to make sure that it stayed close to his story, because Blatty was a very religious man, and most of the stuff that comes through in these stories is the way he actually feels about the nature of evil and the power of religion and faith and good, and how that can either go badly or well for you depending on your circumstance and what the fates have in store for you. And at the end of this book, I think Kinderman has this whole thing about saying, like, because of how much evil he's seen in the world, he has this theory that the Big Bang was Lucifer's fall from heaven, and that the entirety of the universe is like Lucifer taking all of his different evil pieces and bringing them back together so that he can eventually like ascend back to heaven. So it's like, yeah, the universe is just the different evil pieces of Lucifer that are trying to coalesce and come back together. I'm like, that's really dark and fucked up and interesting and cool. And if you want to kind of continue this trilogy into some similar themes, I would recommend watching The Ninth Configuration, which is the other movie that Blatty directed. It's part of what he calls his like faith trilogy or whatever about this, and also doesn't have an exorcism in it, but deals a lot with these same ideas of like, where does evil come from, and is it from humanity? Is it some sort of outside force? And this movie kind of plays with that and explores like how it affects the different like big institutions, where it tackles it has the church, it has the police force, and it has the medical institute. So it's like
church, it's got the steeple.
How does evil infiltrate all of these like staple institutions in our lives and affect them? And yeah,
Still is.
yeah, for sure.
Well, let's talk about the jump scare a little bit. Did it get you?
I think just because of how prolonged it's drawn out, how it does a little throwing you off the scent toward the beginning, with a little different jump scare, and just the way it's set up, camera wise, it still lulls me enough into a false sense of security that it doesn't make me jump, but it still like just what is happening in that scene like still makes my blood run cold. Like I still think it's a terrifying circumstance and a terrifying setup, but it didn't. I don't know if it's ever made me jump. Like by the time I watched this movie, one, I had it in my head that it had the best jump scare of all time, and two, like it's a jump scare. Like jump scares don't get me super often anymore in anything, even if they're well executed.
You?
So I mean, like similarly, it like it gave me a little chill up the spine, but not really anything outside of that, because like I said, I was expecting it to happen. I will say the weapon that they use through a significant portion of the film, those giant fucking shears, are pretty creepy.
Yeah, apparently invented entirely for this movie, which makes
I
sense
know they
to
don't
me,
see
because I was
any
like, why
medical
the fuck
purpose.
would anyone ever need that tool in a medical? It's just like a giant pair of garden shears used specifically for cutting people's heads off. Like, that's the only thing I could think, or like a quick amputation, just like snip, take your leg off.
That's what they got. They got themselves a Macho Man for that, a bone saw.
What I love so much about that jump scare, though, is that just like with the rest of the movie, it cuts before you see the horrific thing that's about to happen, and so it's left up to your imagination exactly what happened right after that moment, but you get just enough to, like, now your mind is racing in that direction. And then this movie's also very weirdly edited, where it'll just be like, as soon as somebody finishes saying a sentence, it'll just cut to the next thing. It has like a really weird kind of off-kilter editing style to it, which I don't know how much of that comes from Blatty just not being a super experienced filmmaker, or if how much of that was intentional. But I think it adds kind of like to the weird discomfort, but it also just keeps the ball rolling. So like that, you don't sit with that scare forever. It just immediately cuts to the next scene of Scott and people talking and what's happening next.
Yeah. They. Never mind.
You getting Pazuzu'd, bro?
Yeah.
You getting possessed? All right. Well,
All right. Exorcist 3. Worth it?
Yeah.
Not worth it?
It's worth it.
yeah,
Extra worth it?
I love me some George C. Scott, and
Better than The Heretic?
I thought about going back and rewatching The Heretic, and as soon as I like hovered over it, you know how the Apple TV plays like the trailer at the top of whatever you're about to watch?
Yeah.
It's immediately like Saturday Night Fever disco music, and it's like, you saw The Exorcist, now come for the end. I was like, no, thank you. Nope.
Bye.
I'm in the mood for dreary, depressing, evil wins. The world is a horrible place.
And Evil died that night, so
Yeah, it definitely did.
crossover
die
with
that night.
David Gordon Green.
Yeah.
There we go. That's how it connects.
But yeah, again, highly recommended if you listen to this whole thing for some reason and hadn't seen the movie. Well, luckily we didn't spoil any of the big scare moments. I also just like it reminded me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre flashbulb sound. Mm-hmm. The like weird like sting sound that it does whenever those shears come out, and especially during the big iconic jump scare.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you guys enjoyed it?
Yeah.
Had a good time with
I'd watch it again.
Would you?
Yeah.
That's what I was about to ask you.
And
Did
then
it?
Dorff is just electric.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because he's playing, sort of a mental patient in this. One of his most famous roles is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and then Ninth Configuration is basically One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but without Dorff, but with almost everybody else from this cast.
Oh, really?
In it, like Jason Miller and all of them. So I was just like, yeah, he's just always floating around those like
Serial killer.
Yeah,
mental patient
roles.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys want to talk about a much more lighthearted, inspiring flick?
Tim Burton's Ed Wood.
Yeah, let me pull up some info on this.
This is when he was still working with Denise Denavi. She's kind of the Burton Deborah Hill.
Yeah,
and she did produced a lot of his early movies. So this is a production between them.
Yeah, I always
So
forget how early
married
this
for a
came
while.
out relatively in his career, 94. So this was after his Batmans, after
That
his
was a real long time
Beetlejuice,
ago?
after his. And yeah, so directed by Tim Burton. The synopsis for this is: when it came to making bad movies, Ed Wood was the best. The mostly true story of the legendary worst director of all time, who, with the help of his strange friends, filmed countless B movies without ever becoming famous or successful. And this stars Johnny Depp, back when he was actually trying and not a piece of shit, as far as we knew.
He did some
Johnny
acting
Depp
in this one, huh?
did some acting.
He
yeah.
damn did. As Ed Wood Jr.
As Edward D. Wood Jr.
Jr.
Martin Landau in an absolutely fucking phenomenal performance as Bela Lugosi. When I first watched this movie, I did not know this wasn't Bela Lugosi. I, for some reason, because I didn't know much at the time, thought that
Object Permanence just gone.
Yeah, they just got real old Bela Lugosi. Sarah Jessica Parker as Dolores Fuller. Patricia Arquette as Kathy O'Hara. Notorious pedophile Jeffrey Jones as Criswell.
Which one was that?
He's the hypnotist.
Oh.
Yeah, and they found a bunch of kiddie porn in his house in real life. Bill Murray in a hilarious turn as Bunny Breckenridge, Lisa Marie as Vampira, and Jim Myers as Tor Johnson, Vincent D'Onofrio as Orson Welles.
Doing a hella weird voice too. Is that how Orson Welles sounded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's D'Onofrio's voice. I think they dubbed him with a Welles impersonator.
How funny.
Yeah, that's how Wells sounded. I just watched.
I was like, what the hell?
I was watching Orson Welles movie the other night.
I did a little bit of research because there's some terms thrown around this movie, and I was curious about what that is and what the difference is. So they say transvestite and they say transsexual. So I looked into a little bit what that is. Transvestite. Both of them are terms that they don't really use anymore. Transvestite is somebody who cross dresses for like a sexual pleasure. Now has just become known as cross dressing, and so that's the more common term. In case you were curious, transsexual can fall under the blanket of transgender, but transsexual typically refers to somebody that had one gender and identifies as something different from when they were born, but then had an operation, had some kind of surgical stuff done, so now they are different. But that again is now a term that is kind of out of fashion. From what I read, if somebody identifies themselves as that, then it's okay. But if not, then typically the term you want to use is transgender, and then there's drag.
Yeah,
Which is just doing cross-dressing essentially for a show, for like a performance. It's like a character.
Costumes and all that. Yeah.
So I was curious. I don't know if anybody else out there, but
No,
they
I
threw
think
a lot of those terms out there.
I think that's really
and I was
helpful
like, what
because
is
I think
that?
a lot of people don't, and that's part of the issue that Ed in this movie and the movie kind of tries to tackle is clarifying kind of what his particular situation was, because this movie is not a fact by fact biography of Ed Wood. It kind of exists in a weird Tim Burton-y surreal optimistic version of Ed's life, but the things that are true are the fact that Ed Wood really, really felt most comfortable dressing in women's clothing, specifically Angora. Do
you know if it's true that his mother dressed him as a girl, and that's why it started when he was younger?
I believe so, yeah, and I know that's something that's been used in like
Sleepaway Camp,
Insidious movies and Sleepaway Camp and stuff. Yeah, but he makes a point in the movie to iterate that he is sexually attracted to women. He is straight. He just enjoys and feels more comfortable in women's clothing. Yeah, and it's kind of like who accepts that about him and who doesn't, and how that. Partially that and partially just his eternal kind of like dumb optimism is what gets him mixed up with his kind of Avengers team of weirdos that helped him make his most famous or infamous movie, Plan 9 from Outer Space. So this movie is really like the couple year period leading up to the production of Plan 9 from Outer Space. It's not like birth to death, and that was something that the writers wanted to avoid. They were like, we think a biopic is a lot more successful when you just kind of drop in on a specific important moment of this person's life that kind of helps show what their entire life was like or what their kind of vibe was all about. And so he's married. Is he married or is he just in a relationship?
I don't think they're married.
Yeah, he's in a relationship.
No, because he says girlfriend, and then I don't think they live together.
Yeah,
because like when I go home or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just anyway, he's with Sarah Jessica Parker when he reveals to her that he likes dressing like women or that he cross dresses. She's freaked out by it. And
people are immediately like, "Are you a fruit?" We get an F slur thrown around.
Yeah,
and like Anthony was saying, he's like, "No, I'm straight. I just am comfortable like this."
Well, and he even tries to use it to explain why he feels he would be a good fit to the studio head, who's the
for what eventually became Glenn and Glenda.
Yeah, he's the pills are good.
Dumb
and Dumber guy,
the gas man.
The gas man. Yeah. He's trying to explain to him like, hey, I would be great for this movie because when I fought in World War II, I'm a veteran, but when I fought in World War II, I paratrooped with women's lingerie on, and I love that line where he's like, I was less afraid of dying and more afraid of like getting injured and somebody having to undress me and find out that I was wearing women's clothing, which is horrible. And that's like his whole internal struggle that he's that's going on inside of him, and that turns into Glenn or Glenda, which is then obviously a huge inspiration for Mancini and the Chucky franchise and the Glenn and Glenda characters, which I don't think a lot of people realize that's where that comes from. Like they probably don't realize, and that's why in watching Seed of Chucky, I think that movie has a very intentional Ed Wood style to it that to me really works, having seen Plan 9 and loving the Ed Wood story so much. But I can see how it would turn a lot of people off, just like Plan 9, which I think really in the grand scheme of really terrible 50s B movies,
it just fits right in.
Plan 9 is not an awful movie. It
just doesn't have good continuity.
Yeah, and it's just misguided, but it's like, it's not about the small details. It's about the big picture.
Yeah.
But
that makes it more real.
But yeah, really the movie is about a man with eternal optimism who wants nothing more than to make movies with his friends, which is what I was saying about Romero. That's the inspirational part of this, is like he just wants to make movies, and he will do whatever he needs to, including having his entire film crew baptized so he can get money from a church to help him fund a project. He will do anything he needs to, but he's always got a big smile on his face. And in the course of this movie, the big impactful meeting with him is meeting Bela Lugosi. Different than how in real life he didn't meet him in a coffin shop or funeral home or whatever it is, but this is a real life relationship that they had. And Bela did end up passing away while they were, like, before they started Plan 9, but Ed had some leftover footage that he used, and they used a stand-in and all of that. But I had never put this together until I was listening to the commentary
Who
for
was
this
the
movie.
track on the track?
It was
Burton?
Burton on the track.
Burton on the
Burton
track.
on the track. Lando's on the track. The writers are on the track. I think a couple other people. Depp's not on it, but the writers were saying that they felt Burton was such a perfect person to do this movie because it reminded them of his relationship with Vincent Price.
Yeah,
and that's
totally.
where the emotional connection for Burton came. Was he was like, oh, I want their relationship feels exactly like, I idolized this man. I met him. Price, it seems, was a lot nicer than the version of Lugosi that is portrayed in this. Lugosi's family was very upset about this portrayal of him in this movie. They said that he never cursed, that he was like the kindest man to all of his fans. In this, he has his moments of like, Karloff, can eat shit, and and it's like going off about that. Apparently, in real history, he and Karloff didn't have a terrible relationship like that.
Yeah, I didn't love that, and then especially at the end, they kind of throw that punch in where it's like Bela Lugosi's stuff sells way more than Karloff's stuff, and I was like, that's a little shitty.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that comes down to the writing, though. It definitely doesn't take away from Lando's performance.
No,
my God, he's so good as Lugosi.
Part of the reason they put the movie in black and white was because when they were doing the tests for his makeup, they were trying to figure out how to get it to work right. And Burton was watching dailies of the tests, and he just like took the slider or the knob or whatever for the saturation and turned it all the way down and went, now he looks dead on exactly like Bela Lugosi in the black and white. That was what we were missing, because they realized they had not really ever seen pictures of Lugosi
in color.
So when they were trying to do this makeup, it was really hard for them to figure out like what color, like what shade should his eyes be, like all, and they were like, black and white, and now he looks exactly like him. And he really does, and like the accent and the performance. And Landau says on the track, like, to him and to the writers, this was a love letter to Lugosi. He was not trying to disparage Lugosi. He did all this research and watched all of his films and learned all about his life. They just took some artistic liberties, I think, to add some dramatic stuff that showed that this was not just a one-note man. Like, their thing was like, yeah, he may not have cursed in front of his family and his fans, but like, he was a human being.
Yeah,
like, he probably got upset and got angry and had things he was mad about. And then they tackle the real life drug addiction that he had to morphine and how that led to his death. And they don't make it overly dramatic, but it does show up in the movie, and it is a part of the movie without taking away from the entire tone of it and like sidelining it into this really hyper dramatic thing. You just get a couple good emotional beats between Ed and Lugosi throughout the movie that really helps solidify their relationship and why Ed really cares about trying to revitalize this man's career and sees him as this legend.
That scene where they're talking, he's like, I'm sure you've got a ton, like 10 or 11 things lined up, like you have to, like you're Bela Lugosi, and he's like, no, I don't have anything. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, because Ed does not live in the real world of modern Hollywood. He's like obsessed with this Hollywood grandeur that doesn't necessarily exist when he's actually there on the sets and trying to make movies and meeting with producers. He's got this very romanticized image of what making a movie should be like. And that's why pretty much everybody is like, this dude doesn't know how to make shit, and like they're all laughing at him at the screening of, I think it's Glenn or Glenda, where they're just like, oh, this must be a prank that they're playing on us and all this stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think it to me, I didn't come out of it going like, oh man, turns out Lugosi was an awful guy. I was like,
No,
it's just like a lot of people who Hollywood forgot about and shit on. And in real life, yes, Karloff had a much more successful long running career, including like hosting his own anthology show and, you know, but I think at the end of the day, you know, I love Bela Lugosi, but I think in reality, having watched a lot of their movies, Karloff was just a legitimately more talented actor who had a bit more range. I don't know, you know, I think with Lugosi, he was a bit more limited in what he could do, and unfortunately was very typecast, even though he only played Dracula twice outside of the stage, once in the original and once in Abbott and Costello. But so, you know, it's tragic, but this happens to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. They just get chewed up and spit out.
Says it in the movie.
Yeah, by Hollywood. And pretty much all the characters in this are people who are just like down on their luck or like trying to get by in whatever craft they're getting by on. And something else that was pointed out in the commentary that I was like, oh, that's really cool, is they wanted you to instantly be able to keep track of who each of these characters were. So the way they introduced them throughout the movie is each person is like in the most iconic version of what it is they do when they get introduced. So Lugosi, they were like, that's why we had him introduced in a coffin. So you would go, that's Dracula, that's Lugosi, boom, got it. The guy who plays Tor, the wrestler, he's introduced in a wrestling rink. You get to see that's where he came from. Criswell at a hypnotism show. So like all these characters, it's like what their main recognizable thing they do is. That's how we introduce them, so that when they all start coming together, you don't really lose track. They're all weird enough characters that I didn't lose track.
The only two that are similar are Sarah Jessica Parker and Patricia Arquette.
Yeah.
Like in the way that they look, not in the way that they act.
Yeah. You get to see how apparently, and I guess a lot of this was true, the whole thing with Vampira feeling like even though she wasn't really doing any hot shit in her career, she just felt like she was so much more important than everybody else.
Oh, really? I thought she had an accent.
She might have. I don't know enough about her or Vampira outside of all the lawsuit stuff between her and Elvira.
And a lot of that wasn't Cassandra Peterson's doing. That was like the studios being like, yeah, this is what we're doing. So like, do you want this role? And her being like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know why Vampire came after her.
But
I read a lot about it.
And I like Ed getting like meeting the woman at the bar and getting like super like excited about like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get all this money from her, and then being on set and she's like, oh no, I gave you all the money that I had, and he's like, oh
shit.
And then they get into the production of the movie and they have stuff like the pilots or the one pilot's like, where's the cockpit set? And they just like drop it down behind him and drop the curtains and sit him down and like, you're in it, yeah. And or like the octopus scene in the pond when they're
where he has to pick. There's no mechanics. He has to like pick it up.
Yeah, and apparently that's a real thing that happened. Is they actually broke into a storage and stole that like big octopus from a different film and brought it in to do that scene. And you have Lugosi off to the side like he shoots up, does his drugs, and then comes out and is like going crazy in the water.
Yeah, I mean, you get some cool Tim Burton staples as far as you get Johnny Depp, and then you get some of the miniature use, which I thought was great and fun. And it does feel like he made a 50s movie, like a Mars Attacks.
It's funny because he did Mars Attacks right after this. So you could tell this is what he wanted to do.
Yeah. But he keeps it pretty toned down. I think that makes sense because this isn't a fantastical story in the same way that his other movies are. Like with Scissorhands, this is supposed to be a little bit more grounded, but it does kind of have that, like you were saying, surreal quality to it. And I think part of what helps with that is the score too. I know it's not Elfman in this;
it's Howard Shore.
Yeah, and it's good. It's like from that opening beat and then whatever jingle he's using. I'm like, yeah. Usually you notice when Elfman's not here, and it's weird, but this I think worked really well.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that was Elfman not being available or if they felt like they wanted to go a different tone for this. But I think, if Elfman had done the music, it might have like just inherently given it more of a fantastic
or like a
kooky tone.
Or dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this stays pretty lighthearted. You always have that kind of eternal optimism of Ed Wood. And while that may not be precisely accurate to who Ed Wood was, I think like this is supposed to be a kind of dream world of like what this experience might have been like for him.
And that's why they got a dream warrior.
That's why they got a Dream Warrior. Yeah.
Have you seen Ed Wood movies?
I've seen Plan 9. I saw it a long time ago. And it's silly, but I mean, I agree. I don't think it's any sillier than, some of the other schlock that came out around that time. But the fact that there aren't reshoots or retakes, they one and done things, even if there's continuity errors or mistakes, like that sort of stuff all adds up, and you could just sit there and kind of just point, do your best Rick Dalton and point around at the screen at all the shit that goes wrong during that film. But
the graveyard fell over, or what did you say? The tombstone fell over.
The tombstone fell over. That's when he's like, it's not about the little details. It's about the big picture.
No one's gonna notice.
Or when he runs into the wall,
Yeah.
and the whole thing just moves.
He would do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was the start of Johnny Depp's. I mean, I guess you could say Edward Scissorhands, but this to me was this where he's actually saying stuff and performing. This was the start of Johnny Depp going, I like playing weirdo characters, but I think in this it's tightened up enough that it doesn't go completely crazy like his Willy Wonka or his Mad Hatter, where it just kind of is him dancing around and doing all kinds of crazy shit. Yeah, he's doing a weird voice in this, but it feels like a voice that a real person would potentially have, especially in that time period. Kind of see, but he's got a bit more of a nasal to it, and he's got the big pearly white teeth, and he looks fucking good. And the costume designer was saying that she was so happy that it was Johnny Depp playing the role because she didn't have to worry about whether he would look good in the women's clothing, because she was like, it's Johnny Depp, he's gonna look good in anything I put him in. And I guess he was totally confident, he didn't have any problems with it, because everybody with Ryan Gosling in the Barbie movie, oh man, he's such a fucking soy boy or whatever, getting shit on by the women. Everything's dude, Ryan Gosling, he is married to Eva Mendes. He has many millions of dollars. He's one of the most gorgeous men on the planet. I think he's okay with his sexuality and his masculinity. I think he's the comfortable one, and this is your problem that you're projecting. And again, that's exactly how Ed is in this movie, where it's he's comfortable with dressing up in women's clothing. He doesn't have a problem with it. He just wants to come out and make the movie and just be dressed as comfortably as he'd like to be dressed, and it's everybody else who has to deal with it.
It's like Trauma.
Yeah. It's Ed Wood's world, and everybody is just living in it.
I think he does the same thing.
Trauma?
What's the guy?
John Waters?
No.
James Gunn.
Never mind.
I know who you're talking about.
Trauma and
the main guy, the fucking Kaufman.
Lloyd Kaufman.
Yeah. I think he does that because I've seen him on sets, and he's just in women's clothing.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously don't think there should be any problem with that, but at the time when Ed Wood
Who didn't wear girl pants?
I wore girl pants.
That's what I was saying.
They'd make skinnies for boys.
Did not.
Very true. Yeah, but I think that I like that this movie is Tim Burton. Like you said, there are some staples. You get some spirals in in a few scenes, and you get a kind of dreamy sequence toward the end with Ed singing.
Practical effects back when he was still doing that shit.
Well, it also reminded me of something like The Disaster Artist, where there's also the fun of, if you've seen Plan 9, seeing him recreate the sets and the scenes with these actors is really cool. Or vice versa, if you watch this, then go watch Plan 9 and you get to see it's almost like you got to see the behind the scenes making of this movie. And unfortunately, you do get some titles at the end that show you kind of where these different characters, even characters you don't even remotely care about, went to after this. The unfortunate truth, and part of why I think they wanted to go with such an optimistic, fancy or surreal route with this, is that Ed Wood's life was not good. It didn't end well. He never got any sort of success. Part of that is that, we can't lie and pretend that he was a great misunderstood filmmaker. I think he was a man who refused to learn how to actually make a movie and just hoped that his sheer willpower and positivity and want to do it was enough to make it happen. And after this, he pretty much went on to do a lot of sleazy horror porno movies for a long time, and then eventually fell deep into alcoholism and drank himself to death.
Jesus.
And was married like a few different times, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with being married a few times. But yeah, I think because his life ended tragically and kind of, you know, penniless and in obscurity, this was the writers and Burton's way of saying like, but there was a happy period right here potentially where everything seemed wonderful and there could have been some sort of like hope in this man's life right here at this moment.
Yeah.
Even if we have to fabricate a lot of that in the construction. I think it gets the spirit of, just that pure creativity and that pure just like desire to. I mean, we totally empathize with that. Like, you know, just I want to be a part of the industry, or I want to be making a movie. I want to be on a set. I mean, that's all he cared about. He's like, I just love being on a set and making movies.
Yeah, I'm sure I would too.
Yeah, I dare you to watch this movie and not at the end have a little bit of the itch.
I'm always itching, baby.
Yeah,
Out of
so
context, that sounds bad. Overall, yeah, great Tim Burton movie. My first time with it. It's probably the only movie of his I haven't seen or until now, and I loved it. I even own it, and I just never watched it.
yeah, that's what was blowing my mind. Is I was just like, dude, I know. Like the first thing we ever bonded about was Tim Burton movies in a drawing class, and the fact that I also admittedly hadn't seen Ed Wood for many years because I was like, oh, black and white biopic, like doesn't seem very Tim Burton to me. But I revisit it once or twice a year now. I just think every time I watch it too, I pick up little jokes and details in every line of dialogue. Like I just love when Bill Murray's getting baptized. It's like, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And he's like, sure. Sure, yeah, I guess. And then they dunk him and he's like, whoa, like he's drowning, and like goes over like a wet rat and grabs onto Ed. It's just you have so many great funny moments that you pick up on a rewatch.
Yeah,
and just a rewatch.
Just a great movie. Like I said, I think that doing it in black and white was an inspired choice. And then just Depp and Landau playing off of each other just works so well.
Agreed. All right, cool. Well, anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just really glad that we got through all of these and that we had a really positive time, I think, all around with all of the last Rites picks.
Yeah.
I think we all got to learn something about each other. And I will no longer end this show being upset that we never covered these movies.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Make
so
me happy.
Next week, just because we wanted to cover a few more things that we hadn't talked about, we are going to do a Vincent Price movie and an Elvira movie.
Yeah, so these are icons that we have a very strong attachment to. I love the shit out of both of these people. I've already been watching a lot of Vincent Price stuff, so we're going to try to pick something that we all haven't seen. And yeah, just end on a happy, positive note, because in my opinion, these are also two horror figures that have gone down in history. One of them has passed, so we can say has gone down in history. The other
still making
with
history.
us, luckily, but has so far gone down in history as just like really positive influences and like really awesome progressive people who have just really, I think, brought a lot of warmth and generosity and awesomeness to the horror genre. And what better way to
almost wrap up a show?
Yeah,
the penultimate
to provide
episode.
a denouement to the show.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. We'll put those up later this week once we decide exactly what we're going to watch, and we'll let you know. And so you can tune in next week if you haven't, or you can tune in to check out those movies. And if you haven't already, watch that bonus shit.
Yeah.
What we talking about?
We talking about X-Men Days of Future Past.
That was fun, and we're having more fun. It kind of works because we're also talking about Young Frankenstein next week. So just, classic Porcelain Peak synergy.
Yeah.
Synergy.
Anyway, thank you so much for checking this episode out, and we'll see you next time. I've been Tone.
I've been John.
I've been losing my mind.
And I've been Internet Darling, Internet Daddy, Anthony D. Silva Jr. Legion.
See ya
Pazuzu.
next time.
Keep it creepy.
See ya.